Welcome to the Painting of the Week podcast, where we look at some of the most significant paintings throughout history. Introducing your hosts, Phil Grabsky and Laura Bentham.
Welcome to this week's Painting of the Week. And we are doing one of my favourite paintings today, so that's nice. It's by Hans Holbein the Younger. His father was also an artist. And it's at the National Gallery, and we'll talk about that in a second, but it's called The Ambassadors. The Ambassadors being two gentlemen whose names are Jean de Danville and Georges de Selve. It was painted in 1533 and was taken off to France, but over the centuries, or anyway, by today it is in the National Gallery, where you can see it for free. It is also, and this is one of the reasons that Laura and I have chosen it, in our film My National Gallery, one of our interviewees has chosen this painting to talk about, and talks about it, well, as they all do with their selected paintings, talks about it with great energy and incitement and knowledge, and it made me want to look at it again. 1533 is a year that is notable because it's the year that Henry VIII marries Anne Boleyn. And you need to understand that to understand this painting. We'll come on to that. But let me think now, they are quietly married in something like, is it January of 1533?
Yes.
And then I think it's Easter Monday. Is there another marriage then? And then there's this remarkable procession and 4 days of celebrations a few weeks later. It's an extraordinary story of Anne Boleyn. And these two guys are the French ambassadors. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Were the chap on the left, for example, one of the things we know about him is that's what he wore at Anne Boleyn's coronation. I should say, of course, if you want to look at the painting, go to seventh-art.com and click on podcast, and the painting will be there, or listen to this on our YouTube channel. So, assuming that you're looking at the painting,
good luck.
If you look at the floor, the floor is not a kind of random just a kind of made up floor that Hans Holbein has created in his mind. It is actually considered to be a representation of the floor of Westminster Abbey, in which the public coronation, marriage rather, of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn takes place. So this is a painting which is absolutely full. You'd be hard-pressed, actually, in the National Gallery, and try and rack my brains, you'd be hard-pressed to find another painting that has more clues and references and allusions, and there are dozens in this painting. Anyway, Laura,
no, seriously, Phil,
what do you think of this painting?
Okay, I have just come in to your house and had to have a cup of tea to start this painting. I've actually left the van outside with all my notes from this week because I cannot actually believe this painting. It feels like a whole chapter of history in one painting that I would have potentially walked past. And I know I say this every single time to you, but I don't know why at school no one thought, what a good idea when you're teaching some children about Henry VIII, that maybe we should have gone on to this painting because we could have had some fun with it, a little treasure hunt, puzzles, why this was here, why that was there, because it just threw up everything to me. So
you're absolutely right. You could teach kids with this painting
100%. I
mean, just down to what they're wearing and where the maps are pointing to and what the musical instrument is.
Yeah. And all of it, because I didn't even know really about this painting.
Find the crucifix.
I come in today, you've got a whole book, obviously. I'm at home with all my little notes and felt tips, thinking, this is just such a wonderful painting and this thing. And I've just been explaining it to a lady who now thinks I'm some kind of weird, I know everything about paintings, but I don't. It's so much fun.
All right, so what are some of the things that you have picked up?
Well,
for our audience who are eager to know more about.
Yeah, okay. So they are the two ambassadors from France, been sent over to keep an eye on Henry, because basically Henry was married to Catherine of Aragon at the time, but he wanted to marry Anne Boleyn, and because he was involved in a Catholic and involved with the Pope, he was asking to grant him a divorce, and he refused.
The Pope refused, yeah.
Yeah. And so Henry, being Henry, came over and said to himself, OK, well, I'm not going to be a Catholic anymore. I'm going to make myself head of the Church of England. Got the Archbishop to null and void his marriage. Then he could marry Anne Boleyn. So the two French ambassadors are here, basically to keep an eye on him.
Which is a hugely significant moment in English history, British history.
Yeah, but now 1533 is going to be stuck in my brain, for sure. I mean, I've learnt that.
But this is a time when the English and French are actually trying to improve their relations. And Anne Boleyn, we should say, I was quite surprised to realise that at this point she's 32 years old. Maybe it's because I've seen a film where she's played and I felt younger.
Younger, okay.
But she's 32. She'd lived most of her life in France. She was, to all extent and purposes, French. When she came, the court language was, as far as I understand it, French anyway. But when she came back, she brought French customs and costumes and French ladies in waiting and this, that and the other. So in some ways, this is a joining of nations when he chooses to marry... which is not unusual, of course, because when you look at the 6 wives he ultimately has, they're from more than 1 or 2 countries, aren't they? But the fact that the Pope refuses to annul the marriage and that Henry feels he has to then become, set up the English Church. Yeah. It's a whole line of history with Thomas Cromwell and the Reformation and it's a... Not the Reformation, sorry. We'll come back to that. You were saying, I interrupted.
Well, no, not at all. Because there are so many clues, like you say, mysteries, but no one now, even now, can give it any real facts. There are facts there, but none of them. Everyone's still guessing, still looking at things, saying, "Oh well, was this here for a reason, and what was that?" So with Holbein. Painting, I'm not even quite sure why he's put all those clues in there, except giving the time of division between Europe, which is then, when you start to analyse the painting, is there these little tiny clues of division, which is about as much as I can see, is the clues of the division. So when you've got Jean de Danteville, which is the one on the left.
Yeah.
Look at him, he's got all the fur, he's got velvet, he's got a lovely sort of medallion. He's holding a dagger, which apparently has his age on it. I think he was 29.
Yeah.
So his life was a bit more... I don't know why there's a division between even just the two of those. And then his friend, and they were friends, I believe, Georges de Selve. He's much more. It's got like a sort of much more toned down robe and everything else.
Elbow on a book.
Yeah. With his age, which was 25, I think. I don't know why they would, because they were friends. Why they were even doing that? But then obviously you come to the table with all the objects, which is full of clues.
Should say this. As I mentioned, this was thought to have been commissioned by Anne Boleyn, but slightly unusual to have a double portrait like this. And then it was taken back to. So who's from Poissy? It's
Jean de Danteville.
Yeah.
The one on the left.
So the painting went back to his chateau, didn't it?
Yes.
I mean, all these instruments. And we'll come on to the blob in a minute, but all these instruments, the maps, the globes, there's nothing accidental here. I mean, it's almost an overload. The map, for example, it's pointing to, you've got, for example, if you look very carefully, you can see the Americas, which has traditionally been Spanish, divided between the Spanish and the Portuguese, but now the French and the Germans are trying to get in on the act. Jerusalem. I mean, if you look carefully, that he's making a point about the rise of French and German interests, French interests above all. Lutheranism, this was the time of the Reformation and Luther. So, that songbook that is open is the words of Luther.
And it's one of his hymns.
One of his hymns. The clock, this kind of cylindrical, it's not really, what do you call it? The kind of cylindrical timepiece is actually set to a very specific date, which is Easter Monday, 1533. But that's also the date of the wedding of Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII. Top left, if you look, there's a little crucifix hidden behind the curtain. You think, what's it doing up there? But I think that's, again, some kind of message.
What message then?
Well, it's been suggested. I think maybe it's in the film. The person talking about it in the films that maybe they're making an allusion to the fact that Henry VIII is thinking of almost not abandoning religion, but abandoning the Catholic faith.
Right. Okay.
I mean, the fact that it's kind of hidden and it's about to be perhaps completely obscured by a curtain it's saying something.
I just think it's so wonderful, though, that he's put all those funny little clues there. But because the lute, that's got a broken string.
It's got a broken string. Well, there is an argument, of course. He's trying to send a message back to France without the British court really realising Henry VIII above all, perhaps, assuming Henry VIII would look at this painting. But actually sending a coded... bear in mind, at this time you had censors, so letters going backwards and forwards would be read.
Right.
And ambassadors or not. So there's a potential argument that what Holbein is doing... commissioned work, so I mean, he's being, he's... The thing you have to also bear in mind is that Holbein's very interesting. So he's German.
Yeah.
Background is the Free State of Augsburg. His father, as I mentioned, was an artist. He spent some time in Bâle, learning his craft. Anyway, fascinating biography, but he ends up in England. He's given a letter of introduction by Erasmus, I think. And on the basis of his talent, but on the basis of introductions and obviously his ability to present himself, he ends up being taken under the wing of Thomas More and Anne Boleyn. And, famously he paints Henry VIII. He paints these extraordinary people. And so we have to be, I doubt he's going to paint a painting of the ambassadors, which is being too contentious or that risks that position. And bearing in mind, people like Thomas More and subsequently Thomas Cromwell. And, Henry VIII was not adverse to executing those that opposed him.
No. But the funny... Okay, so if he painted this then with some clues, and... I mean, he made them quite obvious because they're right in the middle of the painting. And there's a whole bunch of things that people would be like, oh, so do you think, okay, it got sent over to France without people looking at it because it was a painting then and not... It's quite funny, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it begs the question, who's the audience? Who's this for? And to what extent, would there's going to be a cultured audience that would see a painting like this. It's not going on public display. It's not going in a gallery.
No.
It might have been shown in the court of Henry VIII, let's say, before it went off to France, maybe. Would those courtiers, let's say Henry VIII stands in front of it, and the court, Anne Boleyn, people like that, would they have looked closely enough at those maps and realised what those maps were doing? Would they have seen the timepiece set or the broken, set to the Easter Monday, or the broken string, or are these clues that are only going to be read when it gets back to France, where people, I don't know.
It's quite interesting though.
And also, the other thing to say,
No, it's great. I love this.
The other thing to say is whether,
but
were these clues things that these two gentlemen said, we want this in the painting?
Mm.
I mean, Anne Boleyn, did she say, I want this in the painting? Or are these Holbein's decisions that he's putting them in the painting, which would suggest a kind of an intervention on his part, which is quite, these are the French ambassadors to the court of Henry VIII at a time where he's just married Anne Boleyn.
Mm.
Holbein is right in there, in the same way that, Velázquez was in his court. And, sometimes these painters are right. I mean, there's no equivalent today. There's no court painter.
No.
That is, a painter today would probably be engaged, would come in, might get 2 hours with a royal, and that's it.
Yes, okay. There is just so much. I just think it's so funny that I think he'd only ever done real portraits before. He hadn't done many full length paintings. Mm. Suddenly he's done 2 ambassadors and just all these things. Even that, like you say, about the floor.
Yeah. The
Westminster Abbey, it's just clues everywhere.
Well, let's talk about the blob.
Yes, because that's even more funnier to me.
So
what is this? Too good.
I did read in a book. Recently where they said, this was a mystery for so long and only. That's complete nonsense.
Is it really?
Oh yeah. I mean, this is not the only example of one of these. It's a skull, but it's a. To some extent, you could argue that Holbein's kind of showing off. Normally, right, skulls are representations of mortality, obviously. And often you'd be just a straightforward skull on a shelf, just somewhere in the painting, reminding you of the ultimate destination of all of us. Okay, occasionally, and this isn't the only example of this, they would do it like this, where it was kind of stretched across the canvas, and you can only see it if you stand to the right of the painting. Mm. So in the film, we film from the right-hand side of the painting, where all of a sudden what is here stretched left to right, it gets compressed because of the angle that you're looking at it, and it looks normal again. It's very odd.
It's so odd.
I mean, it's so odd you almost don't see it anymore, but
no.
It's a very odd thing to do. Again, it's clearly reminding us, if that's not really the narrative of the painting.
No.
This isn't really a painting about the mortality of us all. It's more to do with politics and religion and, these men presenting themselves as intellectual, cultured French ambassadors. So why does Holbein choose to kind of almost put this kind of slash across it to say, well, you're all going to die anyway? And I mean, he wouldn't have done that without, surely the person who ultimately has commissioned this painting would have to be conferred with. I mean, you can't put something on. I mean, imagine if you've asked for a portrait of somebody and you turn up and it's got this, you think,
look, fishbone in the middle of it.
What have you done?
You've smudged the floor.
So,
like you said, it took ages for people to work it out.
Well,
even when they first found the painting, they didn't think the 2 French ambassadors, they didn't think they were who they were. Didn't it take them a while to?
I don't believe it took them ages to work it out, because I don't. It's not that. I mean, it's not like it's the only time in art history that you've got these. What's the word? Not anamorphic, but anyway, these kind of skulls.
Oh, memento.
Well, memento mori.
Oh yeah. Oh no, it is. It is.
I mean, memento mori is very common, but
yeah.
Anamorphic, yes,
Yeah.
it's an anamorphic image, so you need to look at it from the side. I mean,
but did it take ages to work that out? Which side, whereabouts, upside down?
well, okay. The honest answer is I've absolutely no idea. How could we possibly know?
No.
My instinct is that not at all. I'm sure they knew straight away.
You don't think someone just tripped and fell to the right and suddenly looked down and saw a skull there?
Why? I mean, if you've got a painting hanging on the wall, it's not so unlikely that you would look at it from the right. I mean, it might just have been a bit of fun, like just to surprise people. It might have been a way of saying this is not part of the main painting, but like a cast across it all is these gentlemen and the whole court, this whole period, are living under the shadow of death, and rather than just having a skull on the shelf, he's done it in an almost ghostly way. It's just who knows? I mean, maybe somebody listening to this podcast might have a more insight into the history of these kind of anamorphic skulls than I do.
It's quite a skill, though, isn't it, to paint that? I mean, it's actually incredible.
That is the other thing. I mean, you could argue that he's showing off, but to be honest, look at the fur. I mean, the whole thing is a masterclass in painting.
Yeah.
I mean, Holbein is a fantastic painter, and when this podcast comes out, it's possible that the exhibition at what is essentially now the King's Gallery as opposed to the Queen's Gallery, but alongside Buckingham Palace, they've got an exhibition about Holbein. And it may have finished, but the catalogue is, of course, available. But wherever you choose to look up the works of Holbein, or just, do a bit of research into his biography, it's extraordinary, this kind of German painter becoming the court painter at this amazing time. I mean, if people have a favourite period of British royal history, maybe today, may not, but I mean the Tudors, Henry VIII, Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth, that's the period everyone talks about.
Also, I just think it was such a big thing, that whole Catholic Church division.
Well, 1536 to 1540, there's probably not an abbey or a monastery in Britain that's not touched by Henry's dissolution. And you can still travel today very easily and find the ruins of beautiful buildings that were just utterly destroyed.
Yeah.
Where was I recently? Somewhere near Ilkley, up in Yorkshire.
Oh, lovely.
But it's very lovely.
Oh, I love that.
As an aside, Ilkley have the most wonderful cinema. Anyone that goes anywhere near Ilkley, you must go to their art house cinema. It's fabulous.
Definitely.
We went to an abbey there that was destroyed, and you've got the walls are still there, but all the artworks that were trashed and the crucifixes that were melted down. I was once invited, only once, but I was once invited to a dinner at Christ Church in Cambridge. And at the dinner, there was very fancy silverware on the table. And somebody said to me that they were the only college that managed to hold on to their silverware. Every other college at this time had their elaborate silverware, confiscated, melted down,
All right. And do they say why? Why would they?
Well, it's all part of Henry taking control of things, and
it's just
this is a brutal time. Can anyone rid me of this damn priest?
Yeah.
And then the Archbishop of Canterbury then gets assassinated, and
he did absolutely. I mean, wasn't it? I think it was thousands and thousands. I mean, he just was
brutal.
left, right, and centre, getting rid of everybody.
I mean, it gets interesting actually in the film. Another one of the characters that's talked about, or another one of the paintings that's chosen, is the execution of Lady Jane Grey.
Yeah, I can't look at that painting. What's so good with that one?
And we've got a very articulate young woman who's chosen that as her favourite painting. And again, this is a woman who spent more time in jail than she did on the throne.
Yeah.
It was a very dangerous time.
That was after he died, wasn't it, with her?
This is Mary doing that. Yeah. So...
Yes, it's fascinating, this painting.
I mean, I think the thing to say ultimately is that it's a great example of a painting which, we say this so often, but the more you look, the more you see.
Oh yeah, but honestly, Phil,
and there's a lot to read, uncover. Again, somebody else says in the My National Gallery film, many of these paintings are like escape rooms, and you need to read all the clues to really, make the most of them.
I feel like the luckiest person this week. I know I say this to you all the time. I did not know anything about this painting. And I know, and I don't know how many times I've tried to say, it sounds ridiculous, that if I had not have had the opportunity to look at this painting, that I probably would have just walked past. And that would have been really sad, because I don't know much about all these things, and it just suddenly opened up a whole chapter of something that I felt really pleased to be able to understand. We
had a really good idea for a TV series once, which wasn't commissioned, but it was basically how our understanding of history has been formed and guided by the artworks that have survived. I'll give you one example. We think of ancient Greece as being very refined, and because what survived are these beautiful white marble statues.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they had a lot of kind of what we might call folk art at that time too, but that tended not to survive because it might have been, the materials in which these things were created to have been lost. Also, those white marble statues that seem to us so full of grace and clarity, they were actually very garishly painted.
Right.
We did for another film, we did a graphic reconstruction of what the Venus de Milo would actually have looked like. Bright red lipstick and bright blue cheeks and bright blue eyes, and it was very colourful. Gives you a different impression. Okay, that's one way of looking at it, but also another example would be Napoleon. There's a very famous painting of Napoleon where he's on a steed crossing the Alps, and he's young and he's virile, and it's nonsense. This was a small, short guy, and he crossed the Alps on a mule. Augustus. So you imagine that there's no media at the time in the ancient Roman Empire as such. So the only way you knew what your emperor looked like was either through coinage, or when a legion travelled through, into a new area, they would bring with them a statue of their emperor. Augustus wore high heels because he was embarrassed by his shortness. He had bad teeth. He was short. I mean, he wasn't particularly attractive. You look at his statues, that's not what you're seeing. You're seeing someone who's, just come off out of a Hollywood film. He was. The statues of him make him seem strong, virile, tall, young.
Yeah.
So, and of course, we then see those statues and think, "Oh, that's what Augustus looked like."
Yeah.
So our understanding of history is often affected by what has survived. We have Holbein's painting of Henry VIII as a as a bulkier individual. But before that, he was a much slimmer, fitter young man. I mean, again, so a painting like this provides us a singular glimpse at the history of the time. But there aren't that many paintings, for example, of the ordinary lives. So these are exceptional people. I mean, how population was obviously much less, but the amount of people who had this kind of wealth was tiny. Probably like 95% of the population are actually engaged in the production of food.
Trying to, get by.
And it was tough, really tough.
But I just think it's so important, and because when you go, I don't know what it's like at school now, but when we did history at school, we were just governed by what we had to do to get through an O-level.
Yeah.
Which, and I think I said this to you. And I kind of feel like I lost a whole portion of what education I should have had because I didn't really do this.
Same thing happened to me in my A-levels. I really loved history. I loved history from being five, Got to A-level, and the way they taught it was my teacher would stand at the front of the class, would open a book, and we'd go through a chapter, and it'd be on the latest. It'd just be like, and this year the Chinese Revolution did this, and then they went and Ho Ming Tang and Mao Zedong, and God, if only they'd found a painting,
exactly,
or a song, or we'd analysed a film, or just some different way of looking at it. And again, we've only really skimmed the surface of this painting.
Oh,
you could tell so much. I mean, that procession of Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII.
Yeah.
First of all, she comes up the Thames from Greenwich to Tower of London. That must have been something extraordinary. Then there's a 4-day procession, or there's 4 days of celebrations, including an enormous procession. If I remember correctly, actually the French contingent lead the procession. Can you imagine that happening today? No. But everyone's in their fineries. The whole of London would have come out, all the bargees and the bakers, and they all have been out to see this extraordinary.
So there's no paintings of that at all?
I'm not expert enough to tell you that there's no paintings of it. Nothing comes to mind, but I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I think I remember something about, didn't he get rid of a lot of her painting, anything of Anne Boleyn? Because
it's amazing anything survives, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
I mean, this is taken, it's wrapped up and taken back to France.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you can have problems even crossing the channel, so...
Yeah.
And then there's plenty of fires, in these chateaux, and I know that some of Anne Boleyn's, or some of the works at this period are destroyed by fire. So again, it's amazing the paintings even survived.
I know. It's so wonderful. It really,
anyway,
really is, honestly.
All we can do is say either, ladies and gentlemen, watch My National Gallery, exhibition on screen, film number 37, I think it is. You'll find it on 7th-art.com. Although, first of all, it has its cinema release, so you'll find it in the cinemas from June of 2024. Or go to the National Gallery and just stand in front of the painting. And remember to go to the right to see the skull.
And take a pad and make some notes.
And
have a cup of tea afterwards.
and Hans Holbein, the younger, is a remarkable artist to look into. This is quite clearly not his only artwork. So, in fact, if you go next door, go into the National Portrait Gallery and you can see some more of his works. So,
amazing.
Thank you all. One thing which I often forget to request is it would be great if you are enjoying the podcasts just to recommend one friend. The more people that listen, the happier we are. Thank you very much. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Painting of the Week podcast. For more information, please visit our website at 7th-art.com or contact us by emailing info@7th-art.com. See you next time.